Okay, so several people at this point have asked me to do a video comparing the Earthrise to the Generations Arcee. And by several, I mean I think there was literally exactly 3. I've also had debates with a few people at this point about which is better, the Generations or the Earthrise. So if you are one of those people and you see me bring up one of the points we talked about, I just want you to know that I'm not trying to dunk on you. It just gave me ideas on what to discuss in the video because clearly they are things that bother some people. So let's plow into this. Both these Arcees stand at a nearly identical height, with the Generations figure just being a hair taller. Which is funny, because when looking at them on their own, the Generations Arcee looks like it's the shorter one to my eyes. I think that's because of how bottom heavy she is. While both these figures flare out at the waist, the Generations figure is definitely packing more in her proverbial trunk. I just realized while writing that, her butt is literally her trunk in vehicle mode. I've seen arguments that the Generations figure looks fat, and this is the only source I can see that criticism coming from, because if you compare them chest to chest, like they are a couple of anime girls, you can see that the Generations figure is maybe like 5% wider. While I do hate the parts-forming backpack on the Arcee, it does come in handy here. You can see that when I layer these two together, their waists and chests basically look to be exactly as thin, but the Generations thighs are sticking out miles further. Damn boy, she thick. So, really, that is where I can concede that this argument has merit, because in her upper torso, there's no way I could call this fat. As for the head sculpts, I wouldn't call either of these perfect, but one is a lot less perfect than the other is. The Arcee seems to be going for a mixture of the Star Wars flight helmet with the Princess Leia head, and with absolutely no color delineation between the face and the helmet, she looks like she's got a Star Trek forehead ridge. Fun fact, all the way up until I was 17, I thought the show was called Star Trek. Anyways, damn her head is ugly. Something the defenders of this figure like to bring up is that the backpack is smaller. When it's at maximum backpack, no, it's not. I mean, how could it be? The Generations figure actually largely becomes the vehicle mode, whereas the Earthrise one is lugging around the entire thing on her back. Now, with the backpack removed, that's of course going to shift it into the Arcee's favor. But 1, that's fucking cheating. 2, that's parts forming, and if you ask me, that's an even bigger sin than having an oversized backpack. And 3, I actually think this still looks worse. This still looks much less finished. It's so janky looking, I can't get behind this in any way. In both forms, it's a clusterfuck of a backpack. And what's funny is if you really want to cheat and parts form the backpack off, there's a lot of improved knockoffs of the Generations Arcee that actually turn the backpack into a parts forming piece. And you can use it as a shield, and it's bigger. So really, that one is kind of stomping on this one with cleated shoes. Let's get around to posability. This is interesting. While the Arcee has kind of useless wrist joints on her horrible claw hands, the Generations figure has no wrist articulation, but she does have a much deeper elbow joint. Before I forget this, what the hell are these plates on the back of the Arcee's arms? They aren't part of the transformation, nor are they part of Arcee's design in any incarnation. So what are they doing here when the whole point of this figure is to look as G1 accurate as possible? I mean, it fails at that, but was the point to make it fail even harder? The Arcee has a waist cut, which the Generations figure doesn't have, and while the Generations figure has a very deep knee bend, this has a much deeper, much uglier knee bend. Both figures have a thigh cut, but the Arcee has 2 for some reason, but if you try to use the second one, the joint tries to separate as hard as possible. Both figures have a good amount of forward ankle tilt, but the Generations Arcee has a lot more. Both have a nearly equal backward tilt as well, and while once again the Generations is coming out on top, it's also not all that useful to joint, only really valuable in kneeling, which both figures can do adequately. Now, in my What's the Best on Arcee, I erroneously claimed that the Earthrise figure has no ankle pivot. And it turns out for me, I am only half correct. Yes, this figure does in fact have an ankle pivot, and for me, it has precisely 1 ankle pivot. Yeah, I tried the left ankle first, and on mine, that's completely frozen and useless. And because the feet are made out of a very soft, almost rubber-like plastic, I thought the tiny amount of play I was getting was just the material flexing. But no, the other ankle has a working tilt. So if you have a figure that's not messed up, you will get a moderate amount of tilt out of it. The only outright win I'd say that the Earthrise figure has is the waist joint. Everything else is either not that useful or not usefully better. Well, now down to the transformation. One of the criteria I value the most, which I am learning many people don't value nearly at all. But as for the transformation, is it any surprise that the Generations figure kicks the crap out of the Arcee? The Generations transformation is fun, fast, and easy, whereas the Earthrise is a miserable, fiddly pain of a shell-forming nightmare. And the ultimate result is another hard blowout. Because the Generations figure becomes more of her vehicle mode, the robot can be larger while the alt mode remains smaller. And while she doesn't really increase in size all that much in robot mode, the vehicle mode is massively smaller and a massive improvement on the Earthrise figure. The Earthrise vehicle almost comes across something like a monster truck. Look at the difference in size. You could step into the Generations figure, but the Earthrise figure you'd have to climb up to about chest height onto the side, and walk about 5 feet to get to your seat. The proportions on this thing are horrendous. I've got a question. This is a fake piece. Why didn't they just make this section wider? So, bloated proportions aside, it's also just not doing the job on the coloration front. The sides are supposed to be partially gray, and while neither of these figures is doing a perfect job of it, the Generations figure is doing a far better one than the Earthrise. Also, it has a significantly better interior. So, I'm going to break it down like this. The Earthrise figure looks worse, transforms worse, but poses a tiny, minusculely amount better. The Generations figure, on the other hand, looks great, poses great, transforms great. The Earthrise really doesn't have a good reason to exist. Even if for some reason you don't like the Generations Arcee, you gotta admit, they really should have done better making the ER version. Also, the backpack lets you do this, and I don't know why. It's literally got no use. I don't even have any clue why this has a hinge. And that's not half of what I have to say, but it's enough of what I have to say. And I know you know what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So if you like what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.